So, for those who are following politics, you might be aware that Senator Lindsey Graham is up for re-election, but he's not going to be able to coast smoothly the re-election. He faces challenges from both Republicans and Democrats, and joining me now is one such Republican who is challenging him in the primary in June. Please welcome Joe Reynolds. Joe, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Jonathan. Great to be on the pod.
It's great to have you. So, I guess I'd like to talk a lot about policy, but first I just want to ask, what made you decide to challenge Senator Lindsey Graham? He survived last time around with 55% of the vote, and what made you decide to challenge him this time, and what makes you think you can win?
Well, South Carolina is my state. He's up for election this year, and during the past couple of years, I've had a look at Congress, and I've been very frustrated, as a lot of Americans are, with the fact that it doesn't really work the way it should be. And I thought to myself, well, you know, nobody's fixing it. Why isn't anybody fixing it? Well, I'm an engineer. I'm a chief engineer in the Merchant Marine. And I thought, well, maybe I should fix it because I'm used to fixing things on the ship. And when my ship breaks down at sea, I don't say maybe next election I'll get to it, or maybe next year I'll get to it. We have to get to it right away. And that's the kind of drive and urgency that I would bring to Congress. Now, if Congress, one of my pet peeves being an engineer on the ship is when we go to correct something, do some maintenance or do some work or fix something that's broken, we go to the tool board and the tool is broken, then I have to fix the tool. So it's an extra step in the process, or I have to get a new tool. Now, Congress is the tool that America uses to fix its problems. It's Article 1 of the Constitution. Is that the legislative branch, the House and the Senate. And we used to be able to do work in Congress and be able to make deals, as it were, and get things done, but we no longer are able to do that. And part of the problem I looked at very closely as an engineer, why is it broken and what is it about Congress that's broken? Well, the problem is the people that are up there aren't the people we need. We need people who want to fix problems. But what we really have are people who want to get reelected, who like being in Congress. The reason they like being reelected is because they like that gig up there. And to get reelected, they need money. So they do things to get that money. And sometimes those things are not conducive to their constituents' needs. So $280 million were spent last year by pharmaceutical lobbies in Washington on helping these people get reelected. Now, there's going to be a quid pro quo there. There's no doubt about it. You influence candidates and you influence elected officers when you give them money, and they listen to what you need, whereas the average Joe on the street doesn't get that. So I thought, well, to get out of that loop and get away from the money, I would need to not get reelected again. So that was the first thing I did. I said, I'm going to term limit myself. I'm not going to run for reelection. Now, it's a lot easier being a senator because you get 6 years than being a congressman. You're one of 435 people. You only get 2 years, and it's hard to be one out of 435. But as you've noticed, that the Senate lately has been almost evenly divided, and one senator has a lot of power. And I'm there for 6 years. So I could use that power and leverage that power to get some things done to try to reform the way Congress works. And that's what I want to do. I want to try to fix the tool. That's my main aim, because we can't fix things like immigration. Have you even heard anybody mention it recently, fixing it? No, because the people, the politicians up there aren't interested in solutions to problems. The majority and minority leaders like to protect their members, and the way they protect their members is to keep them from making votes on things like immigration or gun safety or climate or any of these other, or Social Security, any of these big problems we face. They don't want their members to take a vote on, because then that solution, those members would have to go back to their constituents and say, this is the reason I voted on it. Well, if you never vote on anything, you never have to defend your vote. So the minority and majority leaders protect their members from doing that. So that's another reform I'd like to make. I'd like to, you know, Mitch McConnell really doesn't have any more votes than anybody else, nor does Chuck Schumer. They only get one vote. But this minority majority leader thing wasn't ever in the Constitution. It's just a custom that and a habit that has been developed since the 1930s that brought some order from chaos. Well, now it's an anchor around America because we don't get anything done because the goal of Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer is to get their members reelected. It's not the goal to solve problems. I'm an engineer. I like to solve problems. I like to try to figure out a puzzle and solve it. And Congress is a puzzle well, I'm mixing metaphors here. It's a tool that's broken. It's also, why is it broken? That's the puzzle I want to solve. I troubleshoot things on the ship. And the most gratifying thing to me is when some intractable problem and we finally get to the bottom of it and our team finally solves it and we figure it out. Sometimes it's very difficult, but when we do finally solve it, that's extremely gratifying to me and to my team, and we get a lot of a lot of happiness out of solving problems. I'd like to solve Congress.
Nice. And you made a decision, by the way, to serve only one term. And I'm just curious as to why you made that pledge and what do you hope to accomplish as a result of that?
Well, when you go up for to be a congressman or a senator, the first thing they ask you to do is to raise money. Now, you're not only raising money for yourself, you're raising money for the party. You're raising money for if you're in the House, the Democratic or Republican Congressional Campaign Committee. If you're in the Senate, you're raising money for the Senatorial Campaign Committee because Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer want you to raise money not only for maybe Lindsey Graham thinks he has a safe seat, or let's say Mitch McConnell has a safe seat. They want you to raise money for other candidates that aren't so safe, say in Colorado or in Maine or in Arizona. So they want you to always be raising money. So half the time of senators and Congress people is devoted to fundraising. And if you don't make a certain mark, you don't get on the right committee, you don't get the right benefits, and they don't help you out in your election. To remove that influence, I said, well, I'll only run for one term. If I get elected, then I'm not going to go up there to raise money. I don't have to kowtow to Mitch McConnell. I don't have to, kowtow to the Republican Party. I serve my constituents, which is what I was hired to do. I mean, the constituents vote on me, and they're hiring me to go do a job for the state of South Carolina. That job is not raising money for myself. So I have some reforms in mind when I get up there, and I'd like to get those reforms on the floor. One of them is to remove the power of the majority-minority leaders. Another is to not allow any fundraising during the legislative work week up there. And another is we shouldn't be raising money in Washington at all. If you have to raise money, you can go to Alexandria, Virginia, just to make it a little less convenient for members who believe that, fundraising is the be-all and end-all. I also have a constitutional term limit that will work because they've overcomplicated the constitutional amendment on term limits by including the House. Mine is only the Senate. Now, the House would vote on it overwhelmingly because all House members have aspirations to be a senator. So once it gets to Senate, I think I could bring it to the floor and there would be public pressure brought on senators to, vote on this issue. And I think we could get it out to the states and get a constitutional amendment for senators. It's a sneaky way of getting it through because even, the senators would say, well, if I'm a political, war horse and I want to stay in politics, maybe I can go back to the House. So there's always that little bit of bait that you're giving them. So instead of including the House in my term limit amendment, I've just only had the Senate. Makes it simpler, makes it easier to vote on.
Right, and you've talked about so far a lot about how members of Congress should work with each other. Let's talk about how Congress should work with other branches of government, because you've made the point that Congress as an Article I branch is a co-equal branch of the federal government. How should Congress's role work in relation to a president who claimed once, quote, "I have an Article II which lets me do whatever the hell I want"?
Well, this brings me to a response that I always get, that people ask me, do you support the president? Well, people either want one or two things. Yes, I'm pro-Trump or I'm anti-Trump. But and when I try to explain my position via Article I, people are like, oh, who cares about that? That's the media environment we live in. Well, to clear that up, I will be honest and say I didn't vote for Trump, and I'm not going to vote for him. It's not my style of leadership it's not a style of leadership that appeals to me. But I will say that there are decent people who have voted for them, for President Trump, and they inquire of me, are you for the president? Well, Article 1 of the Constitution makes it 3 separate co-equal branches. If we wanted a parliament, they would have made a constitution as a parliament, but our founding fathers, the framers, did not want that. They did not want America to be like Canada or to be like Great Britain, because they worried about the head of state, the king or the queen, getting too much power. Now, we don't have a king or queen. We don't have a head of state like that. But slowly but surely, the president has become that cultural figure also. And I think that's a problem. If we want to save our Constitution, we have to make Congress a co-equal branch of government. I do not support the president because that is not my role as a senator. My senator is not to support the president. My role is to work for my constituents and use my own judgment regarding legislative decisions, budgeting decisions, things that, and war powers that Congress has been given. Now, my opinion is Congress, part of the reason, Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer have also given away some of those powers because it's a convenience. They've given away powers to the president, then they don't have to deal with it. They've given away powers to the Supreme Court or to the judges, then they don't have to vote on hot button issues like, a Roe v. Wade abortion or right, other immigration issues. They just let the judges deal with it. It's another thing they don't have to do. It's a matter of convenience, and then they get reelected. So I figure if we have to have legislation and put things on the floor and debate them the way they used to be done, take our war powers back, and Congress, I rarely agree with Rand Paul, but when it comes to privacy and when it comes to the War Powers Act, Congress should get that decision-making back. Now, this isn't to say the president doesn't have a role in defending the country if he thinks we're going to be attacked. That's still in the Constitution. The president can defend the country. He doesn't have to ask Congress's permission. But if there's a proactive role when there's a war and we're going to go to war with Iran or something, then I want to be able to take that vote on the floor, and we should be able to go back to our constituents and tell them why we voted yes or no against on this war. Instead, we're always deferring and saying, well, that's the president. The president wanted to bomb these sites in Iran. The president wanted to bomb these sites in Iraq or Afghanistan, and there's no say anymore. I think people call it the forever war, and it has gone on for a long time. And I think there should be some measure, some way of clawing some of those powers back. Again, the reason we can't do it, we can't claw them back, is because Congress doesn't work the way it's supposed to. And these reforms that I'm proposing are trying to first fix the tool so that it can work. We're never going to get the war powers back if it continues to be just about getting reelected.
Right. And we talk about legislation. Let's see if we can talk about as many topics as possible. But I want to start with something that might be on a lot of Americans' minds due to COVID-19, and that is healthcare. On the right, you've had Republicans who've talked a good game about repealing and replacing Obamacare, but have consistently failed to do that. And because, in my opinion, they really did not have a real proposal. And on the left, you have those who are saying, let's just blow up the entire system and have a single payer system. And I'm just curious, in between those two extremes, where would you fall?
Well, I'm a moderate candidate. I'm a moderate Republican, and I'm an engineer, so I want to try to do things that work. And I'm looking for solutions to problems. I'm not looking for partisan positions. And healthcare has become a hot button partisan position. Why? Because if you never solve the problem, then you can go back and say it's the other guy's fault and get reelected. Solutions are inconvenient to people in Congress. Problems are great. Problems are great to have. So, you can always say it's Obamacare's fault, or you can always say, no, it's the fault of the Republicans, not, who are trying to eliminate Obamacare. Now, regarding healthcare, I am kind of a conservative in a manner of speaking, in that I go by that. I don't know if it was William Buckley who said it, or Roger Scruton who said, a conservative's job is to stand in the middle of the road and say, wait, stop, and that's what I say. We're not going to, Medicare for all, it sounds great, and you got to hand it to Democrats and progressives. They do have an appeal to people because it's a big issue and it sounds great. It's very aspirational for everybody to have health care. I'm the guy who says, wait, stop. Are you really going to tell people who are in unions all across the country that we're going to remove their health care that they've bargained for a long time, given up a lot of pay for, and you're going to give up all that health care and you're going to get something that isn't as good? It's going to be hard work trying to sell that, and it's never going to go through. Now, on the other hand, we have Republicans who are still trying to join this stupid lawsuit, trying to eliminate Obamacare. Well, what a lot of people on the ground do like is they like protections for people with pre-existing conditions. They like the fact that they can keep their kid on health care until the age of 25 because, kids don't have permanent jobs at the age of 22 or 23. They're trying to find their way. People like those things. People like the fact that Medicaid was expanded to include more people so that they can get taken care of. Now, states like Ohio and Montana, who are Republican states, have said, we're not going to join that lawsuit because it's dumb, it's hurting people. And meanwhile, here we are, state of South Carolina, Attorney General Alan Wilson, that's another bugbear of mine, another family, hierarchical family that is in the, political structure of our state, like we have in our nation too. The Bushes, now the Trumps and the Clintons, and some of these hierarchical structures are problematic for democracy. But that's another argument. To get back to the lawsuit, we shouldn't do it. So Obamacare is what it is, and it has helped a lot of people. It's not perfect. We should let the states have more experimentation. States like Maine and Minnesota have come out with reinsurance plans that have dropped premium prices 15 to 20%. Hasn't cost the federal government a dime, hasn't cost any extra money. Now, we should allow states to be flexible. If they want to have work requirements, that's fine. If they want to have other requirements, that's fine. We should be trying to get people covered. That should be the goal. Now, some states want to have harsher requirements than other more liberal progressive states like California. You know what? States are different, and that's a great part of our federal system. And sometimes if we have 50 different states trying to figure out their healthcare 50 different ways, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's like being on a ship. When I'm on a ship and I'm trying to figure out something, sometimes I go to the other sister ships and I say, what have you guys done? And if everybody's doing something different, you might find that one ship has got it down right, and you find out that that's the key to the puzzle. So some of these states experiment, they find out what they can do to get more people on the rolls, get more people covered, and cost less and control costs. Then we can follow their lead. If we don't allow them to do that, if it's always the federal government all the time, then sometimes you don't get the solutions you want. You just get a bloated budget.
Right. Let's talk about an issue that I feel like is not getting enough attention really since Trump got elected, and that is Social Security. Because Republicans talked a good game up until 2016, when Republicans nominated and Americans elected a Republican president who said, I'm not going to support any changes to Social Security. And I got to be honest, when I talk to some of my millennium conservative friends, they really don't think that Social Security is going to be around by the time that they retire. So I guess to talk about an issue that's no one in Congress is talking about right now, what needs to be done to make sure that Social Security remains on a sound financial footing for when my generation retires?
Well, the hard fact of the matter is private retirements are almost non-existent. I mean, some people are really well off and they have good retirement plans like I do. That's great. But if you average it out, it turns out that most people don't have more than $40,000 saved for their entire retirement career, and that's really not going to be enough. And some people don't just go paycheck to paycheck. And if they got injured or they had something happen to their family and they couldn't keep their job, then it's very hard for them to save money. Social Security is incredibly important to America because it is something that people can rely on, and we have to save it. And we have to show millennials and young people that it's for them too. Now, the way to do that, Paul Ryan got bashed around a bit because he said, no, we have to reform it. And, he became the poster child for destroying Social Security. Wasn't fair. It's not fair.
Granny being pushed off a cliff, that whole thing.
Granny being pushed off the cliff. I mean, both sides do it, let's face it. But, and Paul Ryan, had good ideas, or it was a start, from the Republican side. And, to have any compromise, these big decisions have to be Democrats and Republicans coming together. And we used to be able to do it. We had, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill. They didn't like each other politically, but you know what? They could come together and reach agreements in the old days for the sake of America. We can't do that anymore because Congress is broken. Now, everybody knows that Social Security trust fund is running out in a few years. And, and if we want to save it, we have to do things like increase the age by a year. We need to, obviously, grandfathering in the people who are older like me, who were already moved up to age 67. Now, if we move it up to age 68, that's going to be for younger people. They got to get to 68. But also to get some more revenue. It's obvious that we need to get a little bit more revenue. We need to increase the age, and that's called making a compromise. Now, Republicans don't want to raise taxes, and Democrats don't want to, raise these requirements. But to get it solved, that's what we did the last time. We raised a little money and we raised the age, and that's the only way it's going to be solved this time. People are living longer, and Social Security trust fund is running out. Even Ronald Reagan said, well, in 40 years you're going to have to do it again. And here we are, 40 years later, we're going to have to do it again. And nobody wants to do it because it's the third rail of American politics. You touch Social Security, you're going to never get reelected. Well, you know what? Don't get reelected then. What are you going to Congress for? If you're not going up there to do something to help America, then stay home, because we don't need people like you who, lawyers are good at arguments. I like to say engineers are good at solutions. Let's go up there. Let's try to hash something out and get it done. Medicare trust fund is also running out. So, are these things, if we want these things, even a Republican like Peggy Noonan said, let's face it, Americans want Social Security. They want Medicare, these big programs. They want them, they want to keep them, and they want them to be solvent. So we got to start from that attitude. We can't say we're going to go privatize it, we're going to eliminate it. We have to start from there and see if we can work something out. Currently, we can't do that because we got the wrong people up there.
Right. I just want to say, when you look at the different politics of within a state, it actually is interesting to see how it differs from the national level. And South Carolina is an example of that, because a lot of Republicans on the national level want to allow oil drilling offshore and open up offshore oil reserves, but nobody in South Carolina wants that. And you have called for a ban on offshore drilling. I know that Katie Arrington, who unseated Mark Sanford, she said that she supported offshore drilling, then she had to walk it back, and she lost a race arguably over that issue. So I guess what I'm curious about is, with you calling for a congressional ban on offshore drilling, why does Congress need to do that, and can't South Carolina do that themselves, considering that Governor McMaster wants to do it, actually supports such a measure?
Right, it's a bipartisan issue down here, really. Maybe some people, there's couple different parts of South Carolina. There's the low country and the upstate, and people who live in the upstate aren't as much concerned about this issue as people who are down in the low country. So we'll start from there. But Governor McMaster, he's a Republican. I think he's been a pretty good governor. He understands that, he's working for all the people of the state, and he doesn't want offshore drilling. What the states can do, and what the South Carolina has done, is they've put in some inconveniences in the system. So if you wanted to drill offshore and you wanted to start testing, it would be inconvenient for you to get the licensing, for you to get the permission structure to go out and do it. We can do that, and the state has done that. but it is, unfortunately, it is a federal permission structure at the moment to be able to drill offshore. Here's the deal. Florida got a waiver. Why did Florida got a waiver? A lot of people think that Florida got a waiver because Trump lives half the year at Mar-a-Lago, and they think that's why they got a waiver. If Lindsey Graham is so influential with this president, and I think I'm being a little facetious here because obviously I don't think he is influential, but he likes to pretend that he's influential with this president. Why doesn't South Carolina get a waiver? Why can't we get a waiver? You know, so I'm going to put that on the table too. But part of the problem is that these are issues politicians try to avoid rather than run to. So you end up having Lindsey Graham doing a little fudge, saying, well, states should have the right to, you know, ban offshore drilling, but that apparently isn't the case. You know, that's not the way the law is structured at the moment. So it's a little bit of a fudge, and they don't want to really deal with it too much. I think we can ban it because we've done so well with fracking. So, you know, here I am. I'm a moderate. I have a grab bag of issues. You know, I do think fracking has been good for America, and it's been energy self-sufficient, and it's helpful to us in America and Canada as well, be away from Saudi Arabian oil. So.
Well, I'm glad that I have a guest on the show who says that they like fracking, because the guest I had on the last show said she was completely opposed to it and that she wanted to see it phase out. I want to move on to the topic of immigration, because one of the things that bothers me as a conservative who supports legal immigration is that I feel like there's a growing sentiment on the right that all immigration is bad. This is something that Tucker Carlson has said a lot, and Charlie Kirk. You might have heard about this. He tweeted expressing his delight when Trump announced that he was going to shut down all immigration to the United States because of COVID-19. And maybe that is necessary right now, but he seemed absolutely delighted by that. And that just bothers me, because I believe in what Ronald Reagan believes in, which is legal immigration is good for America. So I'm pretty sure. Where do you stand on that, and how do we restore that same confidence on the right in immigration that Ronald Reagan had?
Well, I'm with Ronald Reagan too. Shining City on a Hill, which was borrowed from John F. Kennedy, which was borrowed from William Bradford, or some Pilgrim, Puritan, I can't remember. But you know, Shining City on a Hill, we're America, and we've been built on immigration. There's no doubt about it. You know, I come from an Irish American family. Few generations back, they were, you know, in the potato famine, and they were coming over on the boat, and here we are. I just met. I've been working at a clinic recently. It's called the Shifa Clinic, and it's an Islamic charity. It's down the road from me, and we have a Dr. Khan, and she is a doctor. She also works at the VA, and she told me the other day, I mean, great American success story. She told me the other day her son just got accepted into the U.S. Air Force Academy. This is what America's all about. This is how we roll. This is how we've always done it. And you know, it chokes me up a little bit when I hear stories like that, because that's how. There's no accident. It's no accident that we're the strongest country in the world, and we're also the most diverse country in the world. That's no accident. I think the two go hand in hand. When people come to America, they know, you know, you get in the back of a cab and you see some guy who has trouble speaking English, but you ask him where he's from, he says, I'm American, you know, and that's the way they feel. When they get to America, you're American. As soon as you get that passport, as soon as you become a citizen, that's it. And nobody questions that. And that's the great thing about America. The bad thing is that we have a lot of illegal immigration, and I see that, you know, delivering some of these foods. There's a lot of undocumented workers, and there's no doubt that the people I meet, people who wear the red hats, you know, have sincere and heartfelt approach to immigration, in that there are too many undocumented people here, and you know what? They're not wrong. So we have to balance that, and to balance. Guess what? It's another compromise. There's a balancing act. We want to have more security on the border. We can have it. The Democrats want a DACA deal. Trump is the great deal maker, and yet that all fell apart. Why? Because nobody really wants the solution, because then they'd have to go home and explain to people why they gave, undocumented kids who've been in America for a long time, their citizenship, and they'd have to explain why we're putting a wall up on the border. Well, you need to make a deal, and that's the way to do it. And immigration is important for America, but the reason Americans have soured on it is because they see a lot of undocumented people here.
I know that we're sort of having a time crunch. I just have a few more topics I want to get to. Hopefully, we'll be able to get to them. I just, on the issue of voting rights, there seems to be a divide between Democrats who are saying that, well, Republicans are trying to suppress the vote. Republicans are saying Democrats are trying to get people to vote illegally. So I guess trying to cut through both of those partisan echo chambers, how do we ensure a seamless process for every American to register and vote, while also securing the integrity of American elections?
I remember when I turned 18, I had to go to the post office and register for selective service. Every single 18-year-old male has to do it. I don't understand why we can't have automatic voter registration. I think some states are starting to do that, starting to go that route. It shouldn't be a process to get registered to vote. You should be automatically registered as soon as you turn 18, and it shouldn't be as difficult as it has to be. I like to believe that my party, the Republican Party, has sincere reservations about some aspects of voting, and I don't think it's unreasonable to have a driver's license to go vote. That doesn't, or some form of identification to go vote. But then Texas goes way further. You can't use a student ID, or you can't use all these other IDs. You have to get you have to have a special ID that you have to go through so many hoops to jump through, and I don't think we should do that either. So I would like automatic enrollment. I would like to see that Democrats and Republicans understand that our ballot process is important, and it's robust, and nobody's really cheating. I mean, let's face it, voting is hard enough. It's kind of a pain in the butt, and the idea that people are going around the corner and voting 5, 6, 7 times just doesn't happen. Have you seen the lines, Mr. President? Have you stood in line for 45 minutes going in to vote? Nobody's doing that again. I mean, we're lucky we have civic citizens who actually go and do their duty and stand in line for sometimes hours on end to go vote. The idea that they're voting multiple times is a fiction.
Yeah, and continuing the theme of an issue where two different realities seem to exist is on the issue of the Second Amendment and gun violence. You have Republicans saying, I believe in the Second Amendment. You have Democrats saying, I believe in gun safety. And I'm just wondering, why can't we have both? How can we protect the Second Amendment and also keep communities safe from gun violence? Can we do both?
Of course we can. I have a personal stake in this, and I have a niece who is, has some mental health problems, and she was out on the street. We didn't know where she was. She'd threatened her mother, my sister. She had threatened other people, and then finally it happened. She hurt somebody. Luckily, she did not have a gun, or this person would have been either badly injured or dead. Now, these red flag laws are for people who are at wit's end, families in need. It's not for some neighbor who gave you the stink eye. It's for people who are at wit's end about a kid at school who obviously has problems and has made threats to other people. You look at the shooter in Dayton, he had a rape list, he had a kill list, people knew about it. These people with these definite problems, there should be some remedy. Now, I know a lot of Second Amendment people, they have heartfelt, sincere approach to their rights, and they say that red flag laws are unconstitutional. Well, unfortunately, they're in 17 states already. I mean, this is a states' rights issue. It's a 10th Amendment issue. It's not necessarily a federal government issue. I mean, we should support states that want to do this and want to make remedies. If we can, but as Republicans and conservatives, if we continue to stick our head in the sand and say there is no remedy ever for an individual who has mental health problems, who's out on the streets, who is making threats, who you feel could be a danger to himself or others, if you continue to say there is no remedy for that, well, then one day what's going to happen is Americans are going to get fed up and they're going to take away the whole Second Amendment. And that's not what we want. Now, people like to say they understand the Constitution better than you do, Jonathan, or better than I do. And guess what? I like to tell them my opinion is irrelevant, and so is your opinion, and so is everybody else's. The only opinion that's relevant is the court's opinion, and the Supreme Court says that these laws and regulations are constitutional. 17 states have them. There are even states that have bans on automatic weapons. So it's not unconstitutional if it is in fact, a law at the moment. Now, I don't want to ban automatic weapons. I'm not looking for a federal ban on these things, but there should, at the very least, be universal background checks. My friend, who was a big Second Amendment supporter, said, Joe, I bought a gun in the back of a motel parking lot, and guess what? It was wrong. We shouldn't be able to do that. No, you shouldn't be able to. And these sticking points about passing guns on, in families, I think we can get through that. I think we can get around that. I think, families should be able, grandfather can pass on a gun to his son or a grandson. It shouldn't be the whole sticking point that prevents us from any remedy for some of these problems. Now, the reason why people get so upset is because the NRA has a lot of power, and that's the kind of thing they put out so that they can get fear and get people to be afraid about the Second Amendment, and that it's a big gun grab, and that we're going to prevent you from owning your guns. Well, people in Vermont still have guns. People in California still have guns. People in Florida, Florida most recently has a new red flag law, they have their weapons too. It's not like, the proof is in the pudding. The gun grab hasn't come. So you shouldn't be afraid. But, there's some people you just can't reach sometimes. But when the American public goes 70, 75, 80, 90% in favor of universal background checks, and we still can't do it, well, it's that little 10% that happens to be all Republican, who are actually 20% of the party. And if you need that 20% of the party, it's actually 50% of your primary vote. If you need those primary voters, then you're never going to do anything about, some of these universal background checks, et cetera.
Okay, so a couple of questions left. I think that one of the issues...
Lessons from any Canadians.
Right, of course. I'm not one to speak at all. But I just have a couple questions left. I think that the issue on which the inaction of Congress and has really had a tremendous effect on the issue itself is the issue of veterans. And there have been well-publicized problems with the Veterans Administration, and stats show that 22 veterans a day take their own lives because they don't feel like they're getting the help that they need. So what more can Congress do to ensure that America's veterans receive the care that they deserve?
Well, here's the deal. Veterans Administration was continuously underfunded for a long time. And I have to give credit to the tail end of the Obama administration and the beginning of the Trump administration. They felt there was a need that we had to increase funding for the Veterans Administration. That funding is finally getting down to the ground level where they need it. Now, the problem with veterans and suicide and homelessness, by the way, they're getting better at it, but the problem is that some of these people are hard to reach. They're hard to find. So it isn't that the Veterans Administration isn't trying. It's that some of these veterans are notoriously difficult and elusive characters. They're homeless. People don't know where they are. They're lonely and they're alone. I've met some of them. It's really unfortunate. Some of them are very alone in this world. We have every year a few veterans that just die with no family, no friends, homeless. And it's good to see that the state or these organizations like American Legion or VFW have a nice service for them on their desks, but they're hard to reach. Now, some of these community organizations need to connect with the Veterans Administration, and if we can connect these people who are in need to the Veterans Administration, I think they can help, because I believe that the Veterans Administration has more money to help them. They just can't find them right now.
Right. So I guess one more question left, and then I'll let you go. I know you've got things to do, but on the issue of you talked about foreign policy a little bit at the beginning of this, and I'm just curious that on the issue of America's foreign policy, what does a Reynolds doctrine look like?
Well, I don't have a Reynolds doctrine yet. I have been developing a Reynolds law, but it's more about domestic policy. Reynolds law is if there is no remedy for a rule being broken, then there is no rule. So consider, the way the Department of Justice has worked lately. If Congress can't subpoena people, then guess what? They can't subpoena people. So that's the Reynolds law. But the Reynolds doctrine, if I had one, would be that we need our allies, and we can't just dismiss our allies. And I think the president has been pretty naive in thinking that America can go it alone. We've gone with others. They respect us. I've been all around the world as a chief engineer. I've been, to all these places: Australia, Japan, Great Britain. I lived there for a while. France, Italy, Spain. Guess what? Sure, they complain about America, but guess what? They like America. They want America to be the big brother on the block. They want to have that character on the block that prevents the bullies from getting out of hand. If we're the big brother, sometimes, guess what? We got to take a bigger share of the burden, and we do, and we have for a long time. And now President Trump has complained about the fact that we're getting robbed. Well, maybe we are a little bit, but not as much as he thinks we are. And we need to reach out to those allies and make sure that they know that we appreciate them. A little country like Denmark really pulls their weight in international affairs, pulls way over their weight class in international affairs. And yet, President Trump insults them with this, we're going to buy Greenland, and now I'm not going to come to the state visit. Denmark has been one of America's strongest allies for a long time. They're right behind us every time we need them, and we can't insult them. We shouldn't insult them. Germany is a very strong country. They could help us a lot. Japan as well. We need to have an organization that is of democratic states instead of the United Nations. We have the United Nations Human Rights Organization being run by countries like Saudi Arabia and China, running the World Health Organization, and obviously we can see what happened there. We need an organization of democratic states where we get to decide, who is allowed in, and all these democratic states can decide on things like climate, things like world health and pandemics, things like human rights, without this cloud of always having to appease countries like Russia or China or Iran or Venezuela. We can't get everybody to agree on everything, but if we had democratic states only organization, we could probably get a lot more done than having, is Saudi Arabia really running the Human Rights Organization? What are we doing?
Exactly. There's a lot to fix in the world, but I think at the end of the day, we got to fix what's back home first, and I think that ultimately we can do both. Joe, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, and good luck on your primary.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jonathan. Great to talk to you. Hope